Hi, welcome to the Bluebird Box Knitting Podcast. My name is Anna and I live in northeast-ish Alberta, Canada with my husband, our 4 kids, and my parents. They live on the same property but not the same house. Their house is right over there. It is the beginning of February and it's wintry outside. It's a cold day today. This winter has seemed to go up and down quite drastically, but today's minus 20 with wind, which means it's more like minus 30. So you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as the Bluebird Box, and I now have a newsletter that you can sign up for pattern release information, and whenever I release a new pattern I give a significant discount. So that's also a good thing to be in the know because it doesn't last for very long. And also you can sign up for future test knits there for accessories or garments. So it's a Google form that you have to fill out. That's the easiest way for me to compile email addresses at the moment since I don't have a website. I hope to get one soon, but it's on a long list of things to do. So until that time, you do need a Google account in order to sign up for the newsletter, unfortunately. That's just the simplest way for me by far right now. So I will put that link in the description below. There's a little arrow. It looks kind of like a V, or you can click on the show more. So the V is on your phone or your iPad or any kind of mobile device. And then the show more is on like a computer. If you're watching on a computer, you can click that and see. I will put the link there to sign up for the newsletter. I hope you're all well and that you've had a wonderful January. Ours just seemed to scream by, but February always seems to go by in a blink of an eye because it's such a short month, so I'm sure it will be March before we even know it. I wanted to share the things that I've knitted and designed in the past month, so I'll start off with accessories. First off is a test knit that I did for my pal Gabi. Gabi is a young, new, aspiring designer, and Gabi test knitted for me back in 2019, I think, and she test knit the Spray Lakes cowl, and I hadn't heard from Gabi the entire test knit. And back then I was really not good at keeping track of where specific testers were in the pattern. And so it came to about a week before my projected release date and I realized I hadn't heard from Gabi the entire time. So I messaged her and was like, just wondering if you managed to cast this cowl on at all. Have you done any of it? Haven't heard from you. And she wrote back and she was like, yeah, finished. And she had these amazing photos done. And I was like super impressed. So anyway, I've been following Gabi for a while, and you should be following her too. She has like the most amazing smile that you can't help but be happy when you see her smile. So she's also a very talented designer, and she has is releasing this shawl this month. I think it's on February 16th, but you should follow her to find out the exact date. And it's called the Mammatus shawl. So she was looking for test knitters, and I told her that I would send out an email to my test list to help her out. But then once I sent it, I was like, you know what, I really want to test that. So she was sweet enough to include me in it. And it was quite a fun design. It's knit from side to side. And there's all kinds of different textures to play with. I'm not a very good tester because I don't generally use the correct yarn or follow instructions very well. I did follow the instructions, but except for the color changing. Hers is 3 different colors that shift, so this would be one color, and then this is the second color, and then this is a third color, and it shifts really nicely in these yarn over sections. But I didn't have enough yarn in the right weight for that. I also thought like this, my shawl was a really good example of how the classifications of yarn don't necessarily mean much. So in this shawl I used, so the shawl pattern calls for sport weight, but I used Sport DK, yes, I think I just used different Sport and DK, but they're quite different. So this one here is a DK, non-superwash, but right next to it is a superwash DK. I don't know if you can see how different this one is. This non-superwash DK is so much thicker and poofier than this superwash. And then we go into a non-superwash Sport, which probably I think is even thicker than this superwash DK. And then we go into a superwash DK, which is quite similar to the Sport non-superwash. And then there's a Sport non-superwash, Sport non-superwash, and yeah, the rest are Sport non-superwash. So just an idea of how different yarn categories can really overlap and merge and shift, and gauge is what's important more so than what category your yarn is. Oh, also I find if you have a superwash in a certain category and a non-superwash of the same category, the superwash is generally thicker, even before blocking, but especially after blocking. So that's something to keep in mind also. So this is, yeah, this is the Mammatus shawl. Oh, and I didn't show you the beautiful cable border that runs along. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and Gabi did a great job in designing it. So it's not a very big shawl, so I actually like to wear it with my, this is a Knox Mountain Knits shawl cuff. It's a recycled belt that they make into a cuff, and then it keeps your shawls, especially the ones that aren't super big, it keeps them nicely in place. Go, I'll keep that on for a bit. Okay, so another thing I've been working on this month is, I'm sorry if my hair is going everywhere. It is February in Northern Canada, which means it's super staticky. Everything is super dry, especially my hair. So it's probably flying all over the place. So I've been working on a new collection of patterns based on the Always chart, which is found in the Twisted Stitch source book. I'll show you here. So this is the Twisted Stitch source book by Nora Gone, which I love. Super fun stitch patterns in here. And I will come. I'm not coming now. So this is the Always stitch here. So I used it in the Always vest, which is coming out this month, and I'll show in a bit. And I also designed this cowl with it and this hat. And I plan to also do a pair of mittens, for mittens to go with it. So it'll be kind of like the Miles collection where you have 3 patterns with the same kind of design. This one I used so I got this yarn from Erin at the Yak Yarnery, and Erin, that's a yarn store in Rocky Mountain House, but Erin and I have interacted for a while. She test knit the Wild Rosie dress for me. She was one of the most honest test knitters I've ever had, which is the best kind of test knitter. Someone who like kindly tells you the truth. So ever since then I've been a big fan of Erin, and she opened up a yarn store in Rocky Mountain House which carries all kinds of lovely stuff, and so I asked her for some advice about this pattern and the yarn I was looking for, because I wanted to match the gauge of the Always vest, which is actually it's a worsted, but it's quite a thick yarn, to be honest. I'll talk about it in a bit, but I wanted to have 2 yarns held together for this one. So actually this hat is 1 yarn held single, like 1 strand, same kind of yarn for both, and this is 2 strands held double. And I used Eco Tweed DK. So I told Erin that I was interested in this yarn because I saw it on her website. But a great thing to remember about local yarn stores is that websites are very difficult to keep up, and often they have stuff that's just arrived, or their inventory has changed, and they might have stuff that you don't see on the website. So actually it's a great idea to talk to the store person, like call them up or message them, email them, and they're so helpful. So she gave me some other options, but I actually ended up going back to this one. But it was great to see that there were other options there that I hadn't seen on the website. So that's something I forget to do, and I should do more often. So this is from Estelle, which is a Canadian yarn company, and it's called Eco Tweed DK, and it has 75% organic wool and 25% viscose. And I really liked working with it. It's this beautiful purple, but it has these little nups, or whatever you call in DK, or not DK, in tweed, like green and pink and all kinds of beautiful colors in there. So yeah, so I will make a set of mittens with a strand held single, and this is held single and this is held double. So another accessory I've been working on this month is the Cozy Up Knits Throwing It Back MCAL. So if you've been working on it, you probably are finished, or you're much past where I am. I'm on clue 4. And yeah, so I'll show you clue 1 to 3. So the pattern called for 3 contrast colors, but I couldn't decide, so I went with my 4 options. I'm not really sure about this yellow, but people tell me that it will, once it's actually worn, it won't be so bad. We'll see. If I don't like it, I will just pick up stitches, cut it out, and re-knit it in a different color. I think I would probably do another stripe of this dark pink there instead. That's where I'm leaning towards. So then for clue 4, I'm giving you lots of time to pause or skip ahead. You cast on another section So the first clue one starts out with this exact lace pattern, and then yeah, it continues on to this fun little stitch. So that's as far as I've gotten. So I've got quite a bit of clue 4, and then there's the final clue is clue 5. Another accessory that I will be working on, but I haven't started yet, is a collaboration with Yarn Divas. So Yarn Divas is going to be a new local yarn store in St. Albert, Alberta, which is sort of like a, not a suburb, well I guess it sort of is like a suburb of Edmonton, but it's its own city. It's just really, they're really connected. And so they're opening up there, and they've got Robin of Rose Hill Yarns dyeing up some special colorways to match their logo, and I've seen them and they're absolutely gorgeous. And then Melinda of Rye Flower Knits is also designing something, and they asked me, who's like the least big deal of everybody there. I feel quite honored to be a part of that group, and they're really fun. Like Melinda is actually my my tech editor. That's who I use all the time, and she's also an extremely talented designer. She does a lot of shawls, beautiful shawls, and sock designs, and yeah, so we're all from this kind of area, which is really fun. And so I was super honored that they wanted to include me. I actually was not even sure if they were like the real deal when they messaged me on Instagram, and I know Robin from a collaboration a couple years ago, and I obviously know Melinda, and so they said, the Yarn Diva ladies, Chrissy and Sherry, said that they were starting up this yarn store and would I be interested in collaborating, and that Melinda and Robin were part of it. And so then I messaged Melinda and Robin, were like, are these people the real deal? Like, is this a scam? But they're totally the real deal. So anyway, that will be a pattern I will need to come up with before April, which I'm really excited about, getting my hands on that yarn, and I'm really excited about that store opening up. So the final accessory set I can't show you, but it is kind of exciting news because it's my first ever design submission that was accepted. So I'll be mailing that off to the UK this coming up week, and that will be coming out this fall. So now I will talk about garments. First off is what I'm wearing, which is the Sora top. This is a design I released last May. It's a cropped sleeveless top with a little split. I'm very tall, so if you have a normal length of torso, this would hit like the top of your high-waisted pants, so you wouldn't actually see skin there. Yeah, it's really simple but really effective design. There's a lace panel on the back. So the first garment design I'm going to talk about is the Always Vest, which is coming out February 17th. That's a Thursday. Put your name and email on the newsletter if you want to be reminded. So this has that always stitch pattern right along the armpits. And then it has this, so from that panel, this garter part runs all the way up the armhole. It has some waist shaping, so the hem is narrower than at the bust, and it's cropped so that you can wear it over high-waisted things and dresses. It's done in Brittany from Crux Fibres, 100% Canadian worsted yarn. She doesn't have a lot of this base left, but I give lots of alternates in the pattern. I don't know what else to say about that. It was not the easiest thing in the world to design. So when you have a wide size range, like I try to achieve, you have this part of the underarm would be wider as the size increased, which means that your garter, in order to get this garter ridge to run up the side of the armhole for every size was a bit tricky, because it means that you have to pay attention to what you're binding off here compared to what you're decreasing. Like you have to decrease along here once you've bound off enough stitches there, and it's a different number for every size, obviously. But this is a set-in sleeve design, and set-in sleeve designs, you generally want all your decreases for the armhole. So this amount has to be done in 1/3 of the armhole. So if you're still increasing up here, it just looks weird. So that's another thing that, another challenge. So this was more difficult than I thought it would be, but it's a super fast knit now that I've got it all right. It's really quick. Brittany tested for me, and she did hers in I think 3 days. So if you want a really fast knit, it's 15.5 stitches per 4 inches, so that's quite a fat gauge. And yeah, the yarn it's a worsted, but it's a very thick worsted. I would say it's more like an Aran, so it goes really, really fast. So another design that's coming out probably before I podcast again is the Legacy Pullover. This one I talked about in my very first episode, so I won't talk about it again, but I just wanted to remind you of it and let you know that as planned it will be coming out March 1st. Most of my test knitters are already finished, so we're just waiting for that March 1st date. So another garment that I'll be trying to start very soon is the Lennox Pullover. So after all your encouragement from the last episode where I talked about the challenges involved, I kind of buckled down and figured out most of the yoke. I haven't figured out the neckline yet, which is one of the trickier parts, but I figure I'll just get there when I get there. So I'm gonna knit a second sample of this, working through my numbers to make sure that they're okay, because I didn't take the greatest notes when I knit this, and I've sort of changed how I do things in a little bit in some ways. So I will be doing this one soon, but that one is knit in BC Garn Semilla Pura, which I really liked. I would totally knit myself another one of these in that yarn, except that they don't have a lot of colors. So they have a bunch of, I think they're all natural shades. So there's a bunch that are similar to this kind of shade. And then there's some darker ones. So the darker ones are just too dark for making a design. It doesn't photograph well. And then I already have one in this shade, so I didn't really want to knit another one that was super similar. So I found some Sadness Garn Tova at Beehive Yarn Shop in Victoria, BC, in this color, which is 3062 maybe, I'm not sure. So I have nine balls of these. That's only 50 grams. Doesn't even say. Yeah, 50 grams, 160 meters. It's a sport weight, so that's what I used for my original sample, and it looks very similar, so I'm hoping that works out. So if you'd like to test that one, you should sign up to the newsletter. Okay, the final garment that I wanted to talk about was a potential summer top. I ordered this yarn from the Fiber Nook here in Edmonton, and it's a linen, viscose and linen, and it's by Erica Knight. And this color is Neo. I don't know, I guess that's a Matrix reference. So I got that one, three of those, plus this color Covet, which I may or may not incorporate into the design. So I did some swatching. I can show you, it doesn't really tell you much about the design because I pretty much have abandoned this idea, but here's a little swatch. How pretty is this color? Yeah, so that's two garments that I should be casting on soon. I think that's all the knitting I had to show and talk about this time. I know people wanted me to talk about our sheep. So at the time of my last podcast, we had 4 Shetland sheep. We now have 3. I will go into that later, but the reason we got sheep is that we live on an acreage and we have about 7 acres of rough pasture, so it's not great for haying. You can't really get equipment in there. It's not great for some grazing animals like horses. Horses wasn't really an option, but just an idea that you can't just put anything out there. And it's very weedy. So sheep are really good at grazing and, well, okay, let me start again. We decided we needed to get animals out there. So we started looking at some options. We thought about cows, which we still might get, but cows are not very good wide range grazers. They like a certain thing and they just eat that, and then they leave all the weeds and the shrubs and everything. So then I said, well, what about sheep? And my husband was open to the idea, and then we started looking at sheep breeds. And Shetlands they're small animals, so they're easy to manage. They're wool producers, which is of course interesting to me. They come in a wide range of colors, which is kind of fun. They're good lambers. If we decide to breed them, they're quite independent that way. And they're also very efficient grazers and wide range grazers. So they enjoy eating thistles and poplar trees there's a whole bunch of poplar shoots growing up in there that need to get eaten before it turns into a forest. And yeah, and we've already seen evidence of that in the area that we're keeping them in. They love thistles and all the weeds. They just eat them to the ground even before the grass. So that's the reason we picked sheep. So we had one adult ewe, and 1 adult wether. That's a castrated male, so that's good for fiber production. And we have 2 lambs that are both wethers. So since the last podcast, the adult wether had been getting very aggressive towards the lambs, and he cracked one of their horns so that it was bleeding, and his ear was bleeding. I think his ear got pinched between the adult wethers. Adult wether is called Lars, and the lamb he hit is called Prince. So Prince's ear was bleeding and his horn was bleeding. And then following that, Lars hit Judo, who was in the other lamb, into the side of the shed and caused 2 open wounds on his forelegs. And then following that, honestly I thought his leg was broken, or if he like dislocated it or something. He wouldn't put weight on it. He was just hobbling around. So we took Judo to the vet, and thankfully it wasn't broken, and it just needed antibiotics and painkillers, and he like immediately recovered. But at that point we just couldn't keep Lars around if he was going to continually hurt these little guys. So thankfully the flock, the shepherds of their original flock, were willing to take Lars back. So, and in exchange they're going to get us a ewe in the spring, which was super generous of them. And so yeah, so that was a big relief. So we now have 3 sheep, and yes, we need to fix the fencing in the pasture because sheep need a very small hole in the fence, or else they get their heads and their horns stuck, and lambs, if you breed them, lambs can just walk right through. So we'll need to fix the fencing before we put them out in the summer, but right now they're just in a little paddock back behind the house where they eat the hay bales that we put out for them. They're super easy so far. I mean, they don't produce anything at the moment, but I'm hoping to get their wool from them in the spring, and we're hoping that they will be good grazers in the pasture when we're able to put them out there. I should also tell you about why I called my business the Bluebird Box, and obviously this YouTube channel is called Bluebird Box for the same reason. So before I had kids, I worked as a biologist, and specifically a wildlife biologist. I had a career as a biologist who worked with developers. So anytime a road gets put in or any kind of infrastructure like that, there's environmental laws and legislation that you have to deal with as a developer. And so they will hire biologists to tell them what needs to be done or what have you. So I worked for 2 years as doing that job in downtown Edmonton. It was mostly a desk job, but sometimes I was one of the lucky ones who got to go out on a weekly basis to different areas and do actual surveys. So I can identify Alberta birds by sight and sound, which I'm quite rusty now, but I try and keep up every year. And I also have a federal permit to band birds. That's through the Beaver Hill Bird Observatory near Tofield. I worked at that job in the summer as a university student, and that's how I got my banding permit, which is quite difficult to obtain. You have to band hundreds of birds from a certain number of species. So once you have your permit, you have to continually band. Your name has to be in the banding records every 2 years you have to have an entry. So otherwise your license can be revoked, your permit. So I keep that up every summer by doing this project through the Beaver Hill Bird Observatory, where I check and maintain bluebird boxes it's really close to my house now, actually, where I live, around Elk Island Park and around Fort Saskatchewan. And yeah, so banding is marking birds with a metal tag that has an individual number on it. And we do this so that if those birds are found again, either through banding efforts, through capture efforts, or through dead records, if someone finds a dead bird, if you find a dead bird with a ring on it, you should mark that number down and report it through USGS. So that tells us migration records, it tells us where these birds go, it tells us their survivorship, how long they've lived. Yes, so that is one of the few. I used to have a lot of hobbies as a younger person, but since I had kids, it is very difficult to keep those up, as I'm sure most of you know. And knitting was one of the few things that I kept up just because it's so portable, it's so flexible. You don't have to set up an area like sewing. You don't have to have a lot of equipment. And bird banding was also something I kept up out of a commitment because I didn't want to lose my permit. So those are two of the hobbies that I've kept since before having kids. So kind of as a nod to both of those, I named my knitting business the Bluebird Box. I wanted to touch on some more kind of administrative stuff. So I am now, I have been for a while, eligible to be monetized by YouTube. I haven't gone through with that yet for a few reasons. One is that I started this podcast to market my own patterns, and I've noticed that that's been successful. So I'm not sure what other things I want to market. For example, if YouTube said, we'll give you this money if you talk about this item that we want you to promote on your podcast, I would say no thank you, especially if I've never tried it before. And I essentially feel like that's what advertising is I'm promoting these things on my channel. I'm getting paid to promote them, but I might not actually stand behind them. And as a parent of young children, I don't always stand behind or don't want my kids to see what YouTube advertisements are out there. Like, I don't really want them to see the latest horror film trailer. So I'm not really sure whether I want to do that or not. So if you have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear it. And if you're seeing advertisements when you're watching my show, I'd also really be interested to hear that, because if they're going to show them anyway and I'm just not getting paid, then that's a different story. But if my videos are clear of ads, then I might keep it that way into the foreseeable future. So I will put some podcast recommendations at the end, as I always do, but I just wanted to touch on one of my favorite YouTube videos that I saw this past month. I watched some sheep videos, like videos from shepherds, as you might expect. I don't know if you're into those kinds of shows, but the sheep game with Cammy, he's from Shetland, no, he's from Scotland. And he's a sheep shearer, so he goes in to various different flocks all over the place, all over UK, and shears them. So he has lots of different kinds of breeds that he does, and his channel is very interesting. But last month he went to Wales to go to the farm of Gareth Wyn Jones, who's a Welshman who owns a huge area, who shepherds on a huge area of land in northern Wales, right near Snowdonia. So it's an amazingly gorgeous place, and you get to hear Welsh accents. My father's parents were Welsh. They moved to Canada just before my dad was born, so he's like the only one of his family who wasn't born in Wales. So my grandparents had Welsh accents, and I think it's just the most amazing accent in all the world. I would listen to it for the rest of my life. So I'm always looking for channels with people speaking in a Welsh accent. If you know of any knitting channels, I would be in your debt if you would pass that information on. I would love to watch that. So anyway, you get to hear Scottish accent, you get to hear a Welsh accent, and you get to see this amazing scenery. And Cami does drone footage, so you get to watch from above these sheep moving everywhere. Welsh men do tend to have a certain level of opinion, so you should keep that in mind. But if you can look past that, it's a great episode to watch. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your spending time with me, and I hope that you have a wonderful February. Enjoy it while it lasts, and I will see you hopefully in March. Bye.